Today we are going to continue to learn about area. In today's lesson, we are going to talk more about finding area using our multiplication skills. We have two objectives for today. They say students will be able to apply the distributive property to area models, and students will be able to find the area of combined rectangles. Today is another day that we don't have new vocabulary words, but we again are talking about area, so we should review that area is the measure of the number of unit squares needed to cover a flat surface. Alright, let's go ahead and get started with today's lesson. As I mentioned a few seconds ago, we are going to use our understanding of multiplication and the distributive property to find area of figures today. Let's think about that for just a second. Distributive property is just where we took a multiplication fact and we broke it up into smaller facts that were easier for us to do. So let's look at our figure. Alright, we need to find the area of this figure using multiplication. Now remember, we want to use the distributive property to break this figure up and find the area. That means we need to decide where we are going to break apart the figure into two smaller rectangles. We can do that, and we know it's easy to do that in this example because this doesn't look like a perfect rectangle. So let's pick to draw a line where we are going to break apart the figure into smaller rectangles, and then we can add the areas of each smaller rectangle together to find the total area. Let's practice together to see what this looks like. I'm going to draw that line to break it up into two smaller rectangles like we talked about. That's where I want to break it up. I am going to outline the two rectangles in different colors on this example so that we can easily look at the two separate pieces and really understand this process. The first rectangle we will look at is outlined in blue, and the second rectangle we will look at is outlined in purple. Now that we have the figure split into two smaller rectangles, we are ready to find the area of each one. Let's start by finding the area of the blue rectangle. We see that there are 3 rows down and 7 across. That means that we can do 3 times 7. We know that 3 times 7 is 21. Now let's find the area of the purple rectangle. We see 3 rows down and 3 rows across. So we can do 3 times 3, which is 9. Now remember, after we find both of the areas of the smaller rectangles, we need to add them together to find the total area of the whole figure. So 21 plus 9. And we know that 21 plus 9 equals 30. So we now know that the area of the figure we were given in the beginning is 30 square units. Don't forget, we have to have square units because that's the unit of measurement that we put on area. Now that we have practiced one example really in depth, we are ready to try a few more before you do your learning check on your own today. Here is the next figure. Now when we see this figure, it may look like we could just figure out how many rows we have and the amount in each row, and then we could do some multiplication. But today, remember that we are using the distributive property to break apart figures into smaller pieces. Even though it may seem a little bit silly and you may not want to do this, it is something that you need to know how to do, and it is very good practice. So we are going to look at this figure and decide where we want to break it into two smaller figures. Well, when I look at it, I can see that there are 4 rows down and 7 in each row. 7s are a little bit tricky to multiply by sometimes, so I want to break that 7 up into 5 and 2, since 5 plus 2 equals 7. Now that I know where I would like to break apart my rectangle, I can draw the line to break it up. Now on the left side of the line I have one smaller rectangle, and on the right side I have a second smaller rectangle. Let's find the area of the first smaller rectangle. We see that we have 4 down and 5 across, which means that we are going to set up the multiplication problem 4 times 5, which is 20. The other smaller rectangle has 4 down and 2 across. We can set up 4 times 2, which is 8. Now we need to add together the areas of the two smaller rectangles so that we can find the total area of the original figure. So 20 plus 8, and we know that 20 plus 8 equals 28. So the area is 28 square units. Here's our next example. Again, this figure is already a rectangle, but it's going to be easier to find the area if we break it up into two smaller rectangles using the distributive property. We can see that we have 5 rows down and 9 in each row. 9s can be a little bit tricky to multiply by, so we are going to break up the rectangle along the edge that has 9 units. We know that 5 plus 4 equals 9. So that's where I would like to break up the big rectangle into two smaller rectangles. Here's my line I drew. On the right side of the line we can see, on the left side of the line we can see a rectangle that has 5 down and 5 across. That means we set up the multiplication equation 5 times 5, which we know is 25. And now we can look at the second rectangle on the right of the line and see 5 rows down and 4 across. So we turn that into 5 times 4, and we know that that is 20. Finally, we go back and add all those smaller rectangles together to find the total area. So 25 plus 20 equals 45. So the area is 45 square units. All right, here's another example. Here we go. This is our last example for the day. Here is the figure that we need to find the area of. This one looks like the trickiest figure yet. Let's start by drawing our line that breaks the figure into smaller rectangles. I want to draw a line right here. It makes it so that I have a smaller rectangle to the right of the line I just drew, but the left isn't quite a rectangle. Let's see what happens if I draw another line. Wow, that made it so that I have 3 small rectangles. That's going to work for us. We will just find the area of each of the 3 smaller rectangles and then add the areas all together to find the area of the total figure. Let's do it. The rectangle on the left has 4 down and 3 across, so 4 times 3, which is 12. Then the rectangle in the middle has 2 down and 3 across, so 2 times 3, which is 6. And finally, the rectangle on the right has 4 down and 3 across again, which is 12. Now we know that the last step is to add all of the smaller areas together. Let's do that, which is 12 plus 6 plus 12 equals 30 square units. So the area of that big tricky figure is 30 square units. You guys can totally do this and be amazing. You are now ready to work on your learning check for the day. Please take your time and be sure to practice the strategy that we learned together today so that you have practice with the skill. Have a good day.